Alright, so this is a demo for hand coloring for students that took Art 142 where we covered Lightroom and not Photoshop. There are multiple ways to hand color an image. The way that the students that took 142 with Photoshop are going to do it is a little bit more advanced, and you need a little bit more knowledge of the of specific tools in Photoshop. And so I'm just going to show you guys a way that I used to do it for a long time. For those of you that have taken Lightroom for 142. And this is a total fine way. And if you want to try out the other way, you can try it out. I have a handout and a demo for that too. But I'll just show you a way to do it where you don't have to know a ton of the tools in Photoshop. And don't worry, we'll cover all those tools in Photoshop this semester. So, the first thing we want to do is we want to make a copy of the background of our photo. So, I'm just going to take it and I'm going to bring it down to this little dog-eared icon. Or you can always go Control, Duplicate Layer. Alright, so now I have my background copy, and I'm going to do my painting on this background copy. So I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool right here. The keyboard shortcut is B. And here are my swatches. Whatever color is on top is the color that we're painting. And to switch it, I'm just going to double click, and it opens the color picker. So I'm going to paint the sky in this image. So the sky is going to be something like blue. So I'm going to say like that. Now, my recommendation when you're hand coloring images, black and white images, is not to go over and pick up the most saturated color, because it's going to start looking really cartoonish. You're going to be really surprised how vivid these non-saturated blues are over here. So I'm going to pick one like, I don't know, right there. So over here is the really saturated ones. I'm going to pick one way over here and hit OK. Okay. So now I have my paintbrush, and the paintbrush I can make larger, smaller with the bracket keys, just like the clone stamp and the spot healing brush. And if you see that I start painting, look what happens. Well, that's not what I want, because that's just painting over the detail of the photo. So that's definitely not what I want. So what I want to do is go over here to where the layer mode is, and click normal, and go all the way down to the bottom and select color. So not normal, we want it to be color. And now when I paint over the image, we see that it maintains the detail of the background of the image. We're not painting over it with an opaque brush. We're painting over it with a transparent brush. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to paint this thing. I will tell you that when you're painting yours for your assignment, you're going to want to spend more time and effort and concentration than I'm going to do on this demo, because I'm just trying to get you guys a rough idea how to do this. I'm not trying to do a perfect job. I'm not going to turn this in. Nobody's grading it that I know of. So I'm just kind of painting. I'm going to make my brush smaller. Painting the details here. It's okay if you make a mistake and you paint over something. You can go back and I'll show you how to erase it. I'm going to go and paint in between this guy's legs here. And remember, we're going to print these photos to the original size, and so you don't have to be super perfect. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for sloppy work. I'm just saying, take into account that this thing is going to be printed like 4 inches on the long side. Okay, so that's pretty decent. I could do a little better maybe. Let's say, I think I'd noticed over here that I painted over these logs and the horse a little bit. So I'm going to grab the eraser tool, which is 3 tools below the brush tool. The keyboard shortcut is E. I'm going to grab it, and it's a brush tool, so I can make it larger, smaller, and I'm just going to erase those areas that I overpainted. So the areas that I painted, like I painted over these horses on accident with the blue, I painted over some of these logs with the blue, and notice how saturated that blue looks. I mean, it's pretty saturated for, taking not the most saturated blue in the color picker. So now I'm just going to go and clean it up a little bit. Notice that I just accidentally went to the sky up there. Went over this guy a little bit. Clean him up. Don't got to do a perfect job, but I don't want this guy to look like a smurf. Let me grab my brush again, and I'm going to paint this little area in this area. Let's go over here. And like I said, you would want to spend a little bit more time on this than I'm doing, okay? You'd want to zoom in and really make sure that you're doing a good job painting here. We grab the eraser tool, and then we're just going to erase this stuff, areas that I overpainted. Let's do a quick little cleanup. It doesn't have to be perfect. Things do blend together a little bit. But, okay. clean these ones up, and then we're going to be good to go. I could, if I wanted to, which I would recommend if I were you, I would go and, let me paint this in. I would want all these trees, right? Maybe not all of them, but the big ones, I would probably want to erase. So I'm going to go and just erase this one. I'm not doing a perfect job, but remember, it's small. Just repeating myself here. I'm going to erase this one because I don't want a blue tree. But I wouldn't go and erase every little tiny tree, because some of them are not going to be that noticeable once we get it completely painted. But, you know, some of these we could do a little bit better job on, something like that. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to grab the paint again. Paint this little area. Okay, so that looks pretty good for the sky. And I did that really quick. Oh, over here doesn't look so good. I need to fix that. It does help to zoom out and zoom in and kind of see where those gaps are that I'm missing. That looks pretty good, actually, right there. In this area. Okay, so now I want to move in and start painting this stack of logs here. So I'm going to go down and grab kind of a warmish red, brown, somewhere in here maybe. Hit OK. And remember, I don't want to just start, I want to make sure that it's still on color, right? I don't want it to switch back to normal, because then it'll just paint over the details. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to paint these logs in. If I decide, and I actually think that I would decide this on this, that this color is like, it's not brown reddish enough for me. It's too yellowy. So I'm going to actually change it, but we can still paint it before we change it. So I'm going to just paint this in. Now, I didn't do a perfect job. I'd go in and do all the details, and same thing I did with the sky, even better. But I decided, you know, that color is kind of wacky. Let's maybe go to a different color here. It's like a little too yellow. Let's go like that, maybe. Yeah, and that looks a little bit better. So now I could just paint over the top of that with that. And that looks fine. So I'm mixing those two colors now. And that actually looks pretty good. The other thing that I'm going to show you towards the end of this demo is how we're going to kind of like dull the saturation. Because like I said, it's really, really easy to get oversaturated with a lot of stuff in here. So I'll show you how we can kind of dull it down a little bit. So I'm just going to go in and paint that. Looks pretty good. Remember, if we paint over something like that, I can grab the eraser tool and just go in and erase this guy's head. And we're just going to keep going, and you're just going to go through and paint everything in this image, right? I think that's pretty straightforward. You're just going to keep grabbing the brush, changing the color, and painting into it. Now, if you were to get done and be like, this looks a little too saturated, what you can do is you can go over here to opacity or fill, and you bump the opacity of this background copy layer down, and all the way at 0 it goes back to black and white. 100, it's 100% saturated, and we can just bump the saturation down just a little, and it looks a little bit more realistic. Let's see how different the fill is. The fill and the opacity are going to do pretty much the same thing. You know, whatever one you want to use. I probably always just use the opacity, so I would just maybe bump it down so it's not so cartoonish. So something like that. So that is a really simple way to hand color images. Like I said, you would want to do a way better job than I did by zooming in and clicking around a bunch, okay? So, if you feel up to it, you can grab the handout and then watch the demo for how the Art 142 students are going to be doing, or I'm sorry, the Art 143 students that took Art 142 with Photoshop are going to be hand coloring images, and you can try that way if you feel adventurous.